the exit of Trump and the phone call which took place between the Prime Minister Modi and Trump saying, you must come to the United States of America. Prime Minister says that itinerary does not permit him. And then he reiterates, madhyastha nahi ki gayi, nahi ki jayegi, nahi kabhi hui hai. Please decode it for us, Ambassador Dayal.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on your show. Let me tell you that the context of the call became very important because we will all recall that President Trump had been claiming the credit for having mediated the ceasefire between India and Pakistan. We categorically denied his claims. We had pointed out that the Pakistani DGMO had approached our DGMO and asked for a ceasefire. And it is because of that that we made a decision to end the hostility. So it was nothing to do with President Trump trying to mediate. But President Trump has relentlessly made this claim and has said that he offered a trade deal to both sides, etc., and that is how the ceasefire became possible. That is why, during this phone call, which was 35 minutes long, our Prime Minister told Trump that following our recent conflict with Pakistan, talks on halting military action were held directly between India and Pakistan through the existing channels of both the armies and at the request of Pakistan. In other words, no mediation. Prime Minister Modi also said that at no time were issues such as the India-US trade deal or mediation by the US to broker peace between India and Pakistan were discussed. In other words, he made it clear to President Trump that India has never accepted mediation and will never do so. So in the context of the background, this is very important. And that is why all channels are discussing it, because it needs to be brought out very, very clearly.
Absolutely, sir. Indian story needs to be told. And I recall last time you said very categorically, the wars today are not about a fight on the ground. It's also about narrative. And that is very, very important. Aditya continues to be with me in Dubai. Aditya, decode the entire chain of event in context of the G7 summit and the readout which was handed over to the journalists.
Firstly, I'll tell you what Vikram Misri said is a masterclass in diplomacy, especially Indian diplomacy. Repeatedly during Operation Sindoor and post that, when the ceasefire really happened, it was being repeatedly reported, especially in the Western press, also in the Indian press, that India surrendered. India succumbed under pressure. But the reality of the matter is, because I was in touch with some of the very crucial players who were speaking to J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio at that time, and not a single time was trade discussed. Not a single time did even US mention trade in the negotiations. But you have seen Donald Trump at least come 12 times and speak about this. But now, at the G7, we've had a landmark achievement. There are two crucial achievements that have happened. One is the normalization of the ties that have happened between India and Canada. This was being speculated for the last few weeks that when the government changes, there would be, of course, stability that will at least begin somewhere. Mark Carney and Prime Minister Modi have decided that the High Commissioners will be appointed, which is a huge, huge development. You would remember that post the 2023 G20 summit in Bharat Mandapam, what happened with Justin Trudeau, and Justin Trudeau actually pushed the India-Canada ties to a new low.
To the brink.
Absolutely. So I think Mark Carney has a lot of damage control to do. He has a lot of stability to bring and a lot of trust factor to be rebuilt in this relationship. And that will only happen, and I'll say very point blank, when there is action against Khalistani terrorism and gangsters who are operating on the Canadian soil. On the other hand, Vikram Misri spoke about this relationship and the kind of deals that are coming about between India and Canada. But then came the second statement on this Operation Sindoor and Trump.
I think Mark Carney has to do a little more. I personally feel, because when the Prime Minister was there, there was a huge Khalistani rally that was organized.
Yes.
I mean, I think a little courtesy would have should have come into play, and that courtesy should have been that that permission shouldn't have been given. Aditya.
Just one point, Kartikeya. Just recently has been the 40th anniversary of the Kanishka bombing that happened, in which majority of the Canadian nationals died. Have they got justice? What kind of a message is Canada sending out to the people, to the terrorists, to the radical elements